The virile mountains rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, their peaks wreathed in smoke and shadow. For centuries, the mountains had been avoided by every traveler, merchant, and soldier in the neighboring lands. Tales told of dragons with scales as hard as steel and fire hot enough to melt stone. No one who had entered the mountains had ever returned, and villages at their base whispered warnings to their children. The mere sight of a human approaching the cliffs was said to bring doom. Alex Thorne had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. But he was not a soldier or a treasure hunter. He was a chef, wandering through the lands in search of new ingredients, new flavors, and new adventures. He carried a small, portable grill and a few cooking tools, packed carefully into a worn leather bag. To Alex, the virile mountains were not a place of fear, they were a place of opportunity. Somewhere in those peaks, he imagined, might be herbs, spices, or even meat unlike anything he had tasted before. The air grew colder as he climbed. Rocks underfoot were slick with ash, and the wind carried an acrid smell of smoke. It was a smell that should have warned him to turn back, but it only stirred his curiosity. He paused for a moment, gazing up at a dark crag where a massive shadow moved across the cliff face. His stomach tightened with anticipation. The shadow was large enough to blot out the sun, and its wings stretched farther than any bird he had ever seen. Alex swallowed his fear, reminding himself that he had survived storms, wild animals, and deserts. Dragons, he decided, were just another challenge. He found a small plateau flat enough to set down his gear. From here he could see a valley below, where smoke rose in thin, twisting columns. He set up his grill with careful precision, arranging the rocks to protect the small fire from the wind. As he prepared the first cuts of meat, he felt a prickle of awareness. He was not alone. Movement flickered at the edges of his vision, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Something large was watching him, something that could crush a man with a single strike. Alex forced himself to breathe steadily. He reached for a piece of meat, salted it carefully, and placed it on the grill. The sizzle of cooking flesh filled the air, sharp and fragrant. He thought he saw a glint of gold among the rocks above. Then a massive head appeared over the cliff's edge, scales shimmering in the sunlight. Its eyes were like molten metal, glowing with heat and intelligence. Alex froze, his hands still hovering over the grill. He had expected danger, but not this close. Not now. The dragon tilted its head, studying him. It did not roar, did not charge. It simply watched, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Alex noticed that its mouth was slightly open, revealing jagged teeth that could tear through armor. His heart raced, but a strange thought passed through his mind. Dragons had noses too. They smelled the world. Perhaps, he thought, they might smell the meat. He placed another piece on the grill, letting the smoke curl upward. The dragon inhaled sharply, wings twitching. It let out a low rumble, not aggressive but curious. Another shadow appeared behind the first, and then another. Soon, 3 massive dragons were perched on the cliffs, eyes fixed on him. Alex's mind raced. He could run, but there was no path down the jagged rocks that would be safe. He could fight, but his only weapon was a grill and some skewers. He did the only thing he could think of. He continued cooking. Slowly, deliberately, he flipped the meat, letting the rich aroma fill the air. The dragons shifted, heads moving closer to the smoke. Their rumble deepened, almost like a conversation among themselves. Alex could feel the heat radiating off their bodies, but none of them moved to attack. They were curious, and curiosity, he realized, might be stronger than hunger or fear. Hours passed in this strange, tense silence. Alex cooked, tasting a small piece of meat himself, and tossing tiny morsels toward the edge of the plateau. The dragons sniffed, pawed at the air, and nibbled cautiously. Alex laughed quietly, a sound of relief and wonder. They were not killing him. They were tasting. They were learning. And he, a simple human with a portable grill, was the teacher. As evening fell, the sky painted itself in oranges and purples. Alex sat on a rock, watching the dragons settle onto the cliffs. Their eyes followed him, but now there was something almost like trust in their gaze. He could see the scales glinting in the last light, wings folded, tails coiled. He realized that tomorrow would be different. He had crossed a line that no one else had dared. Not with swords, not with armies. Just with food. Alex slept that night with the fire still warm, the smell of cooked meat lingering in the cold mountain air. Around him, dragons shifted, some curling near the smoke, some perching high above. He did not know if they would stay forever, or if this was only the first step toward a fragile peace. But he did know one thing: fear had not ruled this night. Curiosity, courage, and the simple act of cooking had. And in the deadly mountains, that was something worth celebrating. When the sun rose, Alex prepared for the day ahead. He sharpened his skewers, set up the grill again and cut fresh meat. The dragons stirred as the smell reached them. One of the larger dragons leaned down, sniffing, wings brushing the rocks. Alex smiled. He had survived the first day. But more importantly, he had begun to change the mountains themselves. The deadly mountains, where humans had once feared to tread, were now a place where something new could happen. Something extraordinary. And Alex Thorne, a wandering human chef with nothing but a grill and a dream, was ready to make it happen. The next morning, Alex woke to the smell of cold mountain air mixed with the lingering scent of his cooking from the night before. The dragons had not left. In fact, they had moved closer, settling on rocks just a few feet away. He could see the ripples of their scales under the weak sunlight, each movement powerful yet graceful. For a moment, fear gripped him again. But then he remembered the small morsels he had offered the night before and the careful way the dragons had accepted them. Today he decided he would be bolder. He unpacked his grill and laid out the meat. He chose cuts carefully, some thin for quick cooking, others thicker to see how the dragons would react. He lit the fire, the flames licking the metal grate, and the smell immediately drew the dragons' attention. One of them, smaller and green-scaled, stepped forward first. Its nostrils flared, smoke drifting from its mouth as it sniffed the air. Alex stayed very still, letting it explore. The dragon tilted its head and let out a low, almost questioning rumble. "Easy," Alex said softly. "It's just food." He cut a small piece and tossed it gently toward the dragon. The creature caught it in its mouth and chewed slowly, eyes never leaving Alex. He held his breath. After a moment, it swallowed and looked at him again, this time with something almost like curiosity. Another dragon, larger and with golden-red scales, landed behind the first, wings folding with a soft thud. Its gaze was fixed on the sizzling meat, and Alex realized they were watching more than him, they were learning. As he cooked, Alex noticed the dragons moving in patterns. One would circle above, watching from the sky, while another approached the edge to sniff or taste. They didn't attack. They didn't roar. They were cautious, curious, and above all hungry. Alex smiled quietly. This was working. He had read about dragons in books, studied old tales and maps, but nothing could prepare him for this. Intelligent creatures, massive and dangerous, responding not to fear but to food. He experimented. He added herbs from his bag, letting the aroma drift across the rocks. The dragons leaned in following the scent. One dragon, a dark blue with silver streaks across its wings, even touched the smoke with its snout, curling back as it realized it could not eat the flames. Alex laughed softly. "Not yet," he said. "You have to wait." Carefully he skewered a few pieces and tossed them one by one. The dragons began to eat more confidently, moving closer without any sign of aggression. By midday, Alex was no longer alone on the plateau. He could see dragons perched higher up, wings tucked, watching silently. Some roared softly to each other, a low series of rumbles that echoed across the mountains. He guessed they were communicating, perhaps deciding whether this human was safe, or whether the smell of meat was worth the risk. He kept cooking, flipping pieces on the grill and tossing small bites toward the edge. With each passing hour, their fear seemed to fade. One of the dragons, the largest so far, finally stepped closer than the others. Its eyes glinted like polished amber, and it moved slowly, measuring each step. Alex didn't move. He held out a piece of meat on a long skewer. The dragon sniffed, then took it gently with its teeth. The warmth of its breath brushed against Alex's arm, but he did not flinch. He realized he had reached a turning point. They were no longer just observing, they were accepting him. Encouraged, Alex began trying more things. He laid down herbs around the grill, letting the smoke carry their scents. He added small vegetables to the meat, testing their reactions. The dragons tasted, sniffed, and sometimes nudged pieces with their snouts. Alex discovered that one of the smaller dragons preferred meat cooked quickly over direct flame, while another favored slow-roasted chunks. He was learning their taste as much as they were learning to trust him. As the sun climbed higher, the sounds of the mountains changed. Birds that had stayed hidden during the dragons' patrols now chirped, and the wind carried a softer tone. Alex realized that the dragons were no longer tense. Their movements were careful but relaxed. They watched him, yes, but there was a sense of calm in the air that had not been there before. And for the first time, Alex felt like he belonged in this place, not as an intruder but as a guest. He tried speaking to them, softly, repeating the same phrases he had used the night before. "Easy," he said, "it's okay. Just food." The dragons responded with low rumbles, nods of their massive heads, or the flick of a tail. Alex didn't know if they understood words, but he knew they understood his intent. His careful movements, the gentle offering of food, the patience, these were the language they recognized. By evening, Alex had cooked a full meal. He had learned which dragons liked which flavors, which ones were cautious, and which were curious enough to try anything. They sat around the plateau, wings folded, tails coiled, watching him eat a small piece of meat himself before sharing the rest. It was a strange, quiet scene, a human and dragons sitting together in the deadly mountains, connected by smoke, fire, and food. As the last light faded, Alex leaned back against a rock, exhausted but exhilarated. He realized the mountain was no longer just a place of fear. It was a place of discovery. The dragons had not attacked him, they had watched, learned, and accepted him. And he had learned, too, patience, respect, and courage could achieve what weapons never could. He packed away the grill, leaving small pieces of meat scattered for the dragons. They nudged and sniffed, some consuming the leftovers quickly, others gently testing. Alex smiled. Tomorrow would bring more experiments, more learning, and perhaps more trust. For now, he watched the sun dip behind jagged peaks, the dragon's shadows stretching long across the rocks. In the deadly virile mountains, something new was happening. Fear had not vanished, but curiosity and trust were growing. And Alex Thorne, a wandering human chef with nothing but fire and flavor, was at the center of it all. The morning air in the virile mountains was sharp and cold, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the night before. Alex woke to the soft rustle of wings and the low rumble of dragons moving around the plateau. They had not left. In fact, some of the dragons were closer than yesterday, their massive heads peering curiously at the little human as he unpacked his grill. Alex smiled. They were learning, and today he planned to take that trust a step further. He prepared the meat carefully, cutting it into larger pieces this time, some seasoned with herbs he had found in the valleys below. As the flames licked the grill, one of the smaller dragons, green and speckled with gold, crept closer. Its nose twitched as it inhaled the aroma. Alex extended a piece toward it with a long skewer, holding it steady. The dragon sniffed, then, after a moment of hesitation, took the meat gently in its teeth. It chewed slowly, eyes locked on Alex. Encouraged, Alex began experimenting more boldly. He added different flavors, letting the smoke curl in patterns that drifted toward the dragons. Some leaned in, cautious, others moved back, watching their companions. Alex noticed patterns forming. Certain dragons were bold, willing to test new smells and tastes first. Others waited, trusting the actions of the leaders. It was a rhythm, a dance of curiosity and caution, and Alex was at the center, orchestrating without words. By mid-morning he felt brave enough to try something riskier. He lit a small fire directly under the grill, creating a burst of heat and flames. Normally this would have sent dragons into attack mode, but today they only tilted their heads, sniffing the smoke. Alex carefully tossed skewers of meat over the fire, letting the aroma rise higher into the sky. One of the larger dragons, copper-scaled with streaks of black, stepped forward and nuzzled the grill, sniffing the flames cautiously. It didn't burn. It didn't roar. It simply tested and then stepped back, eyes wide with fascination. Alex realized the dragons were beginning to trust him. They no longer reacted with immediate aggression. They were learning his movements, reading his intentions. When he tossed a piece of meat, they understood it was an offering, not a challenge. He experimented further, cooking vegetables alongside the meat and letting the smoke mix with herbs. One of the smallest dragons, blue with silver wings, cautiously tasted a piece. Its eyes widened in surprise, and it nudged the skewer with its snout for more. Alex laughed softly. "See? Nothing to fear," he said. The day passed in a strange harmony. Alex cooked continuously, tasting, observing, and adjusting. The dragons began to respond to subtle cues. A hand gesture, a turn of the head, the placement of a skewer. Alex realized he had become more than a cook. He was a teacher, a negotiator, a bridge between species that had once seen each other only as predator and prey. He spoke softly as he worked, words meaningless but comforting, carrying tones of calm and patience. As the sun reached its peak, Alex noticed the dragons had begun to play in their own way. One of the smaller ones tried to bat a piece of meat back toward him with its claw. Another flapped its wings slowly, creating a breeze that carried the smoke directly to Alex. He adjusted the skewers so that the smoke spread evenly. The dragons seemed to understand this as part of the ritual. Trust was growing, and with it, a strange bond formed around the fire, stronger than fear or hunger. Then a sudden noise shattered the calm. A rockslide echoed down the cliffs, sending pebbles clattering across the plateau. The dragons flared their wings and roared, heads snapping toward the sound. Alex froze, gripping his grill tools. But instead of attacking him, they formed a protective circle around the fire and the meat, shielding him from whatever threat was approaching. Alex realized in that moment that trust had worked both ways. He had offered them food and patience, and they, in return, offered protection. By late afternoon, Alex tried something extraordinary. He walked closer to the largest dragon, the copper-scaled one that had been hesitant at first. Holding out a skewer of meat, he extended it carefully toward the dragon's mouth. The dragon lowered its massive head slowly, nostrils flaring. Alex's hand was steady. The dragon sniffed, then gently took the meat. It chewed deliberately, keeping its eyes on him. Alex let out a quiet laugh of relief. He had never felt so close to a creature that could crush him in a heartbeat. He spent the evening teaching small lessons. A piece of meat here, a swirl of smoke there, a gentle hand on a rock to show calm. Each dragon responded differently, some shyly approaching, others boldly testing his offerings. He realized that the plateau, once a place of terror, had become a classroom of trust. Alex was the only human there, yet he no longer felt small or powerless. The dragons had accepted him not out of fear, but because he had shown patience, intelligence, and respect. As twilight approached, the dragons began to settle around him. The largest curled its tail near the edge, while the smaller ones nestled closer to the grill, still alert but calm. Alex leaned back on a rock, tired but exhilarated. He had not only survived another day in the deadly mountains but had formed a connection that defied everything he had learned about dragons. He realized that trust was fragile, built slowly, and that the smallest acts, offering food, showing patience, could create bonds stronger than fear or fire. Before sleeping, Alex left small pieces of meat around the plateau. The dragons nibbled at them carefully, sometimes playfully nudging the pieces toward him. He understood that tomorrow would bring new challenges. More experiments, more learning, perhaps even interactions beyond food. But tonight, the fire burned low, the smoke drifting upward, and the dragons rested in peace. Alex Thorne, a wandering human chef with nothing but courage, fire, and flavor, had begun to teach dragons something new, that humans could be friends, not threats. In the Viral Mountains, where fear had ruled for centuries, the first signs of trust and curiosity had taken root. And Alex, with his simple grill and quiet determination, was at the heart of it all. The morning light barely touched the jagged peaks of the Viral Mountains when Alex noticed a disturbance in the valley below. Smoke rose in uneven columns, and the faint sound of shouting carried up the cliffs. His heart sank. Humans. Not travelers seeking adventure, but armed soldiers, moving in formation with weapons glinting in the sun. They were not here to explore or to learn, they were here to take, to conquer, to hunt. Alex hurriedly packed his grill, but he knew he could not simply run. The dragons were still around him, large and powerful, but untrained in human combat. He had built trust with them, but could that trust protect against men with rifles and explosives? He took a deep breath, remembering the lessons of the past days. Patience, caution, and ingenuity had tamed dragons. Perhaps the same principles could save him now. The soldiers reached the lower cliffs and shouted, pointing toward the plateau where Alex had been cooking. They had heard the legends of dragons guarding treasure and thought to claim it for their own. Instantly the dragons reacted. Wings spread wide, eyes glowing, teeth bared, flames flickering from their nostrils. The soldiers fired weapons, but the dragons were fast, agile in the sky, circling with low roars that echoed like thunder. Rocks fell from cliffs as some dragons swooped down, forcing the soldiers to retreat slightly. Alex stepped forward, holding his grill tools like a shield. He shouted, "Wait! Don't shoot! I can help!" But the humans did not listen. Fear had already clouded their judgment. He had to act quickly. He set the grill on the ground and lit a small fire, letting smoke curl upward. Then he began cooking. The sizzling meat smelled richer, stronger than ever, filling the air with a scent that no dragon could resist. The dragons paused. One by one, they turned their attention from the intruders to the food. Alex tossed pieces carefully toward the edge, letting the smell drift across the plateau. The largest dragon, copper-scaled and powerful, lowered its head to sniff the air. Slowly it stepped forward, followed by others. The soldiers fired again, but the dragons didn't attack Alex. They ignored him, focused entirely on the smell of the cooking meat. Alex's mind raced. He ran from one end of the grill to the other, tossing skewers, cutting new pieces, and waving his arms to catch the dragon's attention. They moved closer, forming a protective wall around him. When a dragon snapped its jaw at a rock that was sliding too close, Alex understood that they were defending him, not just interested in food. His heart pounded with relief. He had taught them to trust him, and now that trust could save lives. The soldiers tried to climb the rocks, but the dragon's sheer size and presence made it impossible. One swooped down, roaring loudly, forcing them back. Alex continued cooking, carefully adding herbs to the smoke, letting it drift over the soldiers. The aroma was intoxicating. Some dragons nudged pieces of meat toward the edge, showing the soldiers that this human could control them. Slowly, hesitantly, the soldiers stopped advancing, unsure whether to fight or flee. Alex knew this was his chance. He grabbed a piece of cooked meat and waved it toward the largest dragon. The creature leaned down, taking it gently. Then Alex tossed smaller pieces, one after another, creating a trail from the plateau to the soldier's position. The dragons followed, sniffing and nudging, creating a buffer that forced the soldiers to retreat further. It was not violence that drove them back. It was the combination of trust, patience, and scent. By midday, the soldiers were at the edge of the valley, confused and frustrated. They could not capture the dragons, could not harm Alex, and could not ignore the strange scene unfolding before them. Dragons circling, breathing low rumbles, moving as if in concert with a human chef who waved skewers like a conductor's baton. Alex shouted at them, "Leave. The mountains are not yours." And slowly, carefully, they began to retreat, leaving the dragons and Alex alone. After the last soldier disappeared from sight, the dragons returned to Alex's side. They sniffed the remaining meat, nudged his hands and flapped their wings gently as if congratulating him. Alex laughed with relief. He had survived, yes, but more importantly he had protected the dragons and maintained the trust they had built. It was not strength or weapons that had won the day, it was patience, courage, and the simple act of offering food. He spent the rest of the day reinforcing this bond. He cooked more meat, left small pieces around the plateau, and watched the dragons consume them carefully. One by one they approached him, brushing their massive heads against the rocks where he sat. Alex realized that these dragons, once fierce and untouchable, now saw him as a companion, a protector, and perhaps even a friend. That night, Alex slept with the fire low and the smell of cooked meat lingering in the air. The dragons curled around the plateau, alert but calm, wings tucked and tails coiled. He knew that danger could return at any moment. More humans might come, more soldiers might try to take the dragons or the treasures of the mountains. But he also knew something stronger than fear or fire existed here. Trust, understanding, and the bond he had built with creatures that once only knew destruction. In the deadly Viral Mountains, a human had changed the rules. No longer was it simply a place of terror. It was a place where dragons could be friends, where humans could act with courage and wisdom, and where the power of patience and kindness could outweigh the threat of weapons. Alex looked at the massive creatures surrounding him and smiled. He had learned that day that even in the most dangerous places, one human could make a difference, and sometimes the smallest actions like cooking meat over fire could save lives and create legends. By dawn the next day the mountains were quiet. The dragons roamed the cliffs and valleys, their trust in Alex growing stronger with each passing moment. And Alex, a wandering chef with nothing but fire, flavor, and courage, knew that he had not only survived the danger but had forged a bond that would shape the mountains for generations to come. The morning sun rose slowly over the Viral Mountains, painting the jagged peaks in shades of gold and orange. Alex Thorne stood on the plateau, his grill packed and ready, but he did not feel the same fear that had once gripped him here. The dragons were all around him, resting, observing, and occasionally nudging pieces of leftover meat toward one another. They had grown accustomed to his presence and he had learned their ways. Together they had created a fragile but unbreakable bond. Word spread quickly through the valleys and villages near the mountains. Travelers who had once avoided the region now spoke of a human who walked among dragons, offering food and earning their trust. Some were skeptical, calling it a fairy tale, but the villagers who had seen Alex and the dragons knew the truth. It was real and it was extraordinary. People began to bring ingredients to the mountains, hoping to share in the magic of the human who tamed dragons with smoke and fire. Alex welcomed them cautiously. He taught them how to cook safely, how to approach the dragons without fear, and how to offer food in a way that respected the creature's intelligence. The dragons, for their part, began to recognize more humans as friends, responding to gestures and scents rather than instinctual fear. Some dragons even helped Alex gather ingredients from cliffs and valleys that humans could not reach. The mountain had transformed from a place of terror into a place of cooperation and learning. One day, a young girl from a nearby village climbed the plateau, carrying a basket of herbs. She froze when she saw the dragons, eyes wide with both fear and wonder. Alex stepped forward calmly. "They won't hurt you," he said. Come slowly. Offer them the herbs. With shaky hands, the girl extended the basket, and the dragons leaned forward, sniffing, testing, and then gently taking pieces with their snouts. Alex watched with pride. Trust had spread beyond himself. The dragons were now willing to meet others halfway, to accept humans who came with respect and patience. Over time, Alex developed new recipes, each one designed to appeal to different dragons. Some preferred smoky, spiced meats, while others liked lightly roasted vegetables or sweet herbs. He learned their favorite flavors and patterns, and they, in turn, seemed to anticipate his movements, waiting for the right moment to taste the food he offered. Cooking had become more than survival. It had become a language, a bridge that connected species that had once viewed each other as enemies. Alex also noticed changes in the dragons' behavior beyond food. They became more playful, sometimes flying together in loops above the plateau, or nudging one another with curiosity. Occasionally, one would approach a human and allow a gentle pat on the snout or wing. The dragons had not lost their power or majesty, but they had learned restraint and understanding. Alex smiled at each interaction, knowing that he had helped shape this transformation. The Viral Mountains began attracting more visitors, drawn by the tales of dragons who no longer attacked humans and a chef who had earned their respect. Traders, explorers, and even scholars came to witness the cooperation firsthand. Alex taught them how to approach the plateau, where to place food, and how to read the dragon's movements. Slowly, a community formed at the base of the mountains, one built not on fear or conquest, but on respect, learning, and shared experience. Then came the day when a threat emerged from far beyond the mountains. A group of bandits had heard rumors of dragons and treasures, hoping to claim both. They approached with weapons and fire, expecting an easy victory. Alex ran to the plateau, lighting his grill and tossing smoke and skewers in carefully timed bursts. The dragons, now seasoned in their trust and trained in subtle guidance, responded instantly. They circled, roared, and nudged the intruders back with controlled force, keeping Alex and the other humans safe. The bandits, bewildered and frightened, had no choice but to flee. Alex watched from the plateau as the dragons returned, wings folding, eyes calm, tails coiled. He realized that the mountains were no longer simply dangerous, they were protected. Not by fear alone, but by understanding, patience, and cooperation. He had proven that humans could be allies, not enemies, and the dragons had learned to respond to trust rather than aggression. The Viral Mountains had become a symbol of a new kind of power, one rooted in intelligence, respect, and courage. Years passed, and Alex continued to live among the dragons. He trained new visitors, shared stories of his adventures, and created recipes that became legendary across villages and valleys. The dragons, once solitary and fierce, now moved with grace and purpose, protecting the mountains and humans alike. They had become guardians, not destroyers, thanks to a simple human who had shown them patience, kindness, and the power of fire and food. One evening, Alex sat on the plateau watching the sun dip behind the peaks. The dragons were nearby, some resting, others playing in the last rays of light. He reflected on everything that had happened. The fear, the danger, the long nights of cooking, and the slow building of trust. He realized that this was more than survival or adventure. He had created something lasting, a legend of cooperation, courage, and respect that would be told for generations. Children from villages would come to hear the story of Alex Thorne, the human chef who tamed dragons with nothing but a grill and determination. Scholars would write about it, explorers would journey to the mountains, and the dragons themselves would continue to teach patience and understanding to anyone willing to learn. The mountains, once a place of terror, had become a living legend. Alex smiled as a dragon nudged his hand gently. "We've done it, friends," he said softly. The dragon let out a low rumble in response, and Alex laughed. He knew that this bond, built from fire, smoke, and trust, would last far longer than his own life. The Viral Mountains had been transformed, not by weapons, not by fear, but by a single human's courage and creativity. And so, a new legend was born, one where humans and dragons could exist side by side, each respecting the other, each learning from the other, and each finding strength not in conquest, but in understanding. Alex Thorne had shown the galaxy that even in the most dangerous places, kindness, patience, and a simple act like cooking meat over a fire could change the world. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, leaving the plateau bathed in soft twilight. Alex sat quietly, surrounded by dragons, knowing that this was only the beginning. The legend of the dragon chef would live on, inspiring those who dared to dream, explore, and build bonds where none seemed possible. The deadly mountains were no longer deadly. They were alive, full of trust, and forever changed.